Welcome back, everybody, to Goodwill Podcasting with Dan and Stone, your movie and TV podcast that today is talking about A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. Yes, Westeros is back on HBO, a new spin-off series about the tales of Dunk and Egg. And we are getting not this one season, we are getting hopefully multiple seasons in the future. So it is exciting time to talk about the very beginning of this show. Hopefully, it's going to be a new classic in the future. And we're going to get into all the details of it. Obviously, I think we're going to do a full spoiler because the show's been out for a little bit. We'll talk full spoilers in this episode, talk about what's to come, talk about, what our thoughts were going into the series. But here's the thing. It's not just me and Dan. It never just is just the two of us. That would be interesting, though. Pretty boring conversation. We know each other too well. We have somebody on the podcast today who I went through his videos. By the way, check out his videos at the end of this recording. You're going to love them. But I noticed something in the captions, and I told Dan this. He invited on our guests, and I was like, okay. I've seen him talk about the show a little bit. But then I read in the captions, and it said, I'm happy to go back to my second home of Westeros. I saw that written somewhere, and I said, good Lord. Let me say it in the terms of Game of Thrones. To the seven lords, the seven gods, they have seven something up there. Anyways, I'm blabbing here. It is Gaz. He is on with us today to talk about A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. Thank you, sir, for joining us. There is a time difference, but we're going to work through that. It's not, look at, this is cool that we can do this. Like, where are you at right now?
I'm based in London, but I think it's really cool. Firstly, I'm thankful to you guys having me on the pod. And we've followed each other. I think I've followed you guys at least for maybe a good 3 years or so, maybe a bit more.
Yeah.
And I've just been able to see how you guys have grown as a podcast and individually, and we all follow each other and engage with each other's work. And it's been really good to see how you guys have sort of grown and developed. And I'm just really grateful to have a community that's maybe not next door to me, but it's still a community all the same.
Now, you have your own podcast, correct?
I've got some controversial news. I'm not part of the podcast anymore, but yeah, I was part of a podcast for a good 4 years. And we built it sort of from scratch, similar to you guys. And it was a great learning curve. I learned so much about how to articulate myself and host and work with people. I think it's great being able to do your own work and your own sort of videos, but there's nothing better than discussing something with somebody else. And I think that's the great thing about podcasting.
Yeah, it is cool. I think interesting conversations.
Yeah, and I think you did a really good job with that podcast. I'm sorry to hear that. Whatever went down. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hopeful to continue podcasting. Just it'll be a different place soon, hopefully. But yeah, as for now, sort of a free agent navigating, just being a content creator, quotation marks. But yeah, I'm looking forward to getting back into it soon.
And as we start, could you let people know, guys, where they can find you, like what apps they can find you and your handle as well?
Sure thing. I'm on Instagram. I have like a separate Instagram which is called Viewed by Gaz, where I put all my film reviews, and then my TikTok is Midnight Gaz, which is an ode to the Dark Knight. I was a huge fan of that movie until I watched the Batman, and that became my favorite Batman movie. So Midnight with a K.
Good taste.
Yeah, the Batman, fantastic movie. So,
yes.
Yeah, that's me, Midnight Gaz. You can find me on both Instagram and TikTok. Maybe soon on YouTube. We'll see.
Nice.
Yeah, YouTube's another game. I was gonna say one thing I was always jealous of with your podcast that just made it flow so smoothly. I mean, you can see me interrupting Dan. I mean, he's used to that, which is unfortunate for him. But is that you guys were in person. And that is one thing that hopefully, like one day, me and Dan will get together in person and do this. Not like live next to each other or anything, but like go to an event or something and host this. I mean, people have been talking about it online for years now. They all want it, so it'll happen one day. Connor too. Connor couldn't be here today because I don't think he had the time with his kids and everything to get around to watching this show. Yeah, but he's definitely missed. Have you?
The really cool thing about this show, which I'm sure we'll get into at some point, is I don't think there has to be a huge rush to see it, although it's great to be able to be in the moment because of the sort of community conversations you can have. But I think we'll see the growth of the show maybe in the next couple of weeks when more people cotton on to how good it is.
Because I think the discourse has been overwhelmingly positive, and I feel like a lot of people, I mean, I have seen that the viewership has been pretty good for these episodes as the show was running, but I think the amount of positivity behind the show has been overwhelming. And I think some people who maybe would have been a bit checked out, or maybe they watched House of the Dragon and were like, I'm not into this. Like maybe some of those people are coming around and um, coming into the show late. So, um, we're talking about this a few days, 5 days after the series ended, but I still think people want to hear about it, and we're still happy to talk about it now. So, really a good show.
I'm intrigued to know your thoughts quickly about House of the Dragon. What did you guys think of season 2 and season 1? I guess both, but yeah, what did you guys think?
Personally, I'm a fan. I think I think season 2 was definitely a step down from season 1, but I don't mind. I don't mind slower television. I don't mind episodes where not a lot happens. I personally think a lot of the success of Game of Thrones came from that. I think everyone tends to remember the big explosive moments in Game of Thrones, like the stuff that catches your eye and catches your breath, and people die. There's battles, this and that. None of that works without the connective tissue that is the conversations, the setup, the character work. Like, and this can be applied to everything. This can be applied to Marvel, to Star Wars, to every big thing. If you don't have all of that, the big stuff doesn't work. It falls flat because there's no punch behind the moment. So I don't mind slower television. And I enjoy the characters. I like the feel of it. I still enjoyed season 2 personally.
Yeah, I like it. One thing I love about it is that me and my wife, it's very interesting because my wife, I had watched Game of Thrones, and this is what we were about to get in. I was going to ask you, Gaz, and even Dan too. I don't know if we talked about it, but our relationship with this universe so far and how we got into it and everything like that. I first watched Game of Thrones. I binged it, trying to get to like smoothly transition right into season 8 as it was premiering. And I got there just a little bit late. So I did finish it like a couple weeks for the first time ever after the show ended. But House of the Dragon, I was there right at the debut. And then my wife also watched it with me without watching Game of Thrones, which I think is very interesting. She liked it. I think we watched season 2 together. She's just a big fan. And then and then I'm like, okay, you got to watch Game of Thrones now. And she got maybe halfway through season 7 and we stopped for some reason, which isn't the greatest thing, but I don't know if we missed any great parts of the series. But when it comes to House of the Dragon, I still really do like it. I will say I wanted more from Daemon in season 2. I think that's the universal big gripe with season 2 is that he was kind of just stuck there, and it was like, here it comes. Actually, it's happening in season 3 with that big battle that we saw in the teaser or the trailer. So that was a little bit disappointing. But I think the thing that I love so much about this series and House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones is that I've never really, I don't know if you guys can think of somebody, there's never been a really big miscast. I think when it comes to casting, with this whole universe, it's always been pretty spot on. And also, which is one of the reasons why I think A Night of the Seven Kingdoms is so good, I don't really recognize anybody. Now, I know Olivia Cook, she was in quite a bit of stuff before she played Alicent, but except Matt Smith, Charles Dance, and like Peter Dinklage, everyone is like pretty unknown when it comes to this universe always, and I just love that. It's like Lost, the beginning seasons of Lost. It's like, you don't know who these people are. This is Sir Dunk the Tall. This is Egg. This is Rhaenyra. All these, names and everything. But
we talk about that a lot. But I think, or at least I talk about this a lot. I think sometimes that really helps people settle into stories because you're not looking at the actor, you're looking at the character. And I think that is underrated at times. And I think a lot of filmmakers are, especially in this age of social media and desperate marketing. I think people are desperate to have star power attached for people to latch onto and to draw people in. But you don't always need it. And sometimes I'd rather just see someone disappear into a character and not be like, oh, that's Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's how I feel. So
yeah, totally with you guys on that. I agree on the casting thing, and I agree on as you guys mentioned, in terms of, if I don't know, it's the same thing people talk about with Marvel. Is Captain? Is it Captain America or is Steve Rogers? Which one is it, sort of thing? And I think you guys nailed it, and I think we're seeing it with Dexter Solanso and Peter Claffey, who have just made names for themselves, and they were relatively I know. I mean, Peter Claffey was a rugby player
Yeah.
a few years
Yeah.
ago, so it goes to show they've pretty much nailed. Do you guys have a favorite casting out of interest
Oh, and all of Game of Thrones?
across the
Or-
3 shows or universes so far?
A favorite casting in all of Westeros.
Tough on that.
Yikes.
Tough. Yeah.
I feel like-
probably for me, Gwendolyn Christie, right? Is her name? Brienne.
Oh,
that right?
really?
I've always
Yeah.
been a big fan of that actress. Wednesday is an interesting show. I don't think it's top tier television, but I like that she's in that. And I always like her presence in anything she's in just because she's so good. And it's like when she's on screen, you just have to pay attention. You can't like look away just because of their gravitas that she has, which she brings to every performance, especially as Brienne. But I got the right Gwendolyn Christie, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Off the dome.
Guys, I think when you talk about the best casting, I haven't read them. Have you read the novels or any of them?
I've got a few of them behind me actually. But, yeah, so I've read a couple. I haven't read them all. So
Got you. So I feel like if for people like for Stone and I, we haven't read the novels. So when you asked about best casting, I feel like it's almost like who's our favorite character. But I
Okay.
feel like to have that idea of casting, you have to have context from the book to be able to tie them together. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I guess as someone who's read a little bit, like, is there any character that you feel was cast really well or really poorly from the perspective of someone who's read some of the material?
it sounds like I am copping out here. So I'll name 2, and the first one is a bit of a cop out. It is Dexter Soul Ansel as Egg. I think he's
Okay.
literally embodied everything that I'd want and imagine for Egg as a character. And we'll get into it, so I don't want to say too much on that one.
Mhm.
I mean, there may be a personal favorite of mine, but I guess it's just a character that I love is Damon. I do think Matt Smith has done a really good job, especially when you consider season 2 didn't necessarily give him tons to work with for what people would have expected for the character, but I still think he produced a lot
Yes.
within what was given. I think a lot of stillness was required, a lot of looking inwards to who Damon is as a man in season 2 compared to season 1, where there was a lot more aggression and a lot more sort of front-footed of a character. So those 2 stand out to me for sure. But yeah, I've got loads of characters that I just adore.
I love that you say that about Damon because I think a lot of people use that critique of season 2 in regards to him sitting around not doing anything, blah blah blah. I enjoyed a lot of it. Like I really thought a lot of it was interesting, and I think we sometimes like undervalue subtlety in acting. And I kind of made a video joking about this the other day. Like
I've seen your
people
video.
only ever like and
Where's
and I
Damon
think
screaming?
I think some people took that like maybe I presented it badly because like a lot of the performances are brilliant, but I my point was, and I'm going to make a video talking about it in a genuine way, but we shouldn't just focus on that, right? Like there's so much else when it comes to acting. So I still love a lot of those performances mostly, but and I guess to answer your question, my like top 3 characters kind of stays the same normally, but Rory McCann plays the Hound. Like the Hound is one of my favorite characters in fiction. I love everything about his character. Um, I think he has some of the most meat behind his character in the entire story. And I think just the entire arc of this little brother who's abused and kind of used as a tool by these people until he realizes like he has agency and he can do the right thing. And he's one of the A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is very much a show about knighthood and what does knighthood actually mean? Is it something that you're born with? Is it something that um, is bestowed upon you or something you earn? And I don't think Sandor is ever actually knighted, but he is one of the more knightly, chivalrous characters in that series, despite his appearance and despite the fact that he also does some heinous things. So he's one of my favorites personally.
Do you think he? I saw someone talking about this the other day, and maybe it's because I wasn't into Game of Thrones when it was premiering. Really, do you think he should have died? I saw somebody say that when he was fighting Brienne, right? And you think that maybe she had killed him, and then all of a sudden he comes back and he does eventually fight his brother and everything. But that's pretty late in the series. So, Gaz, you said you've read some of it, not all of A Song of Ice and Fire, right? So I'm not sure. where George R. Martin left off with the Hound? Was
Yep.
it the last thing he did with the Hound, like the fight with Brienne and like the showrunners? Because that was like, I think season 5 or 6 that he fought Brienne, so it was pretty late.
Yeah, I'm not sure where that ends with the Hound's character. I do know, I think by the end of season 4, maybe they'd stopped writing from the book perspective and were taking sort of notes and ideas from George as to what would be in the books going forward. As to whether we get those books, I don't think we will. But yeah, no, I'm not too sure on the Hound. But I do agree, he's a great character because he's not easily explained, and I think those characters are the most interesting. It's the characters that have multiple layers where you can see the humanity in the Hound, but you can also see why he's become the way he is and having to survive in such a dog eat dog sort of world where if you don't fight back, you will get eaten. And I like that duality of the character. I think those are the most interesting characters, I guess, because that's human being, that's humanity. We're not all perfect.
And the Hound helmet is also sick.
I'm sure we'll talk about helmets and armors today. I loved it in the Night of the Seven Kingdoms.
Yeah.
Dan, you looked like you were doing some research. Did you find any information on whether or not that was in the books or?
I'm trying to sort through where he was left, but
okay,
there's a lot going on here. I don't want to try to interpret.
What were your
this
other top
poorly.
2? What were your other top 2?
Brienne is my favorite character.
You made a video about her recently, no?
Yeah, because
she's related.
Sir Duncan the Tall is an ancestor of Brienne of Tarth, which George R. R. Martin had confirmed a long time ago. He has allegedly, I think, 3 or 4 different descendants in Game of Thrones, which he hasn't revealed all of them. People think that one of them might be Hodor, which is interesting. But yeah, it's. I love those two. I also love Sir Davos. He's one of my favorites, and I'm a big fan of Jaime Lannister. Like, I understand he definitely does heinous things, but I think the character the work they did to destroy the character, to completely tear him down and then rebuild him was so patient, and it was so well done. And you feel like so much of what's wrong with Jaime is this toxic relationship with he cannot get away from Cersei, and there's almost poetry there, I guess, in that ending for him. Like, I guess it works, but it's so bad in my opinion. And how he treats Brienne, like, it all
That's
is just
awful,
messy.
dude.
Yeah, but it doesn't feel like it makes sense
Yeah.
in this show, personally.
All of it's rushed.
But
Yeah.
and I love the idea of, even at the beginning of the show, like in season 1, this idea that Ned Stark can't look beyond the idea of him as a Kingslayer. He can't look beyond the idea of betrayal at why that happened. And Jaime might portray him like he comes in and Jaime's sitting on the throne, and obviously he views Jaime in a certain way, but he never had a conversation with him like what happened, what actually went on. And if he had that conversation and he understood that Jaime did the right thing, he could have viewed him in a more nuanced way, but his hatred of him is because he only sees in black and white, which contributes to him being killed. And I feel like Jaime just kind of says, if you all want to view me this way as the villain, I'll be the villain. That's fine. So
kind of plays into one of the flaws of Ned as well. I mean, you mentioned it in a video. I do watch a lot of your videos. That
thank you. Yes.
You did mention the fact that Ned isn't like a hero per se. He's not a bad guy, but again, he had plenty of faults. His death was definitely sad in the show. He was a character that I thought I was really enjoying getting to know, but at the same time, he did some bad things.
Yeah, and it's really the biggest flaw to me rewatching. I just rewatched season 1. His willingness to hand Sansa to Joffrey, knowing exactly what Joffrey is, and especially after Arya tells him straight up, and he obviously trusts and listens to Arya. She tells him he's lying. And basically tells him he's a monster, and he sees his character, and he still is just like, well, in this world, the princesses get married off to the princes to keep the families together. It is what like he is maybe honorable in the framework of that world, but is he actually always a decent man? I don't know. I think he's kind of an upholder of status quo and of how he thinks things should be, and he's naive, which just bothers me in a lot of ways.
Speaking of mixed feelings, maybe we should get into what our first reactions were towards A Night of the Seven Kingdoms when it was announced. So, having not partook in Game of Thrones, the the novelization of it at all, I had no idea what this was. That you're going to get a mini series basically with 6 episodes that are going to be 30 minutes. And I'm like, I do not understand how I can possibly get invested in this story when everything that I've been given so far from Game of Thrones has been very grand. And it seems like huge world, huge stories, huge epicness at times when it comes to certain times in both series. So this was announced, I think, back in 2023. It looks like April 12th, 2023. And I think the original title that they were going to go for was Game of Thrones. You know how that's like The Legend of John Wick Ballerina, some shit like that. So they were going to attach Game of Thrones to the title. So it was going to be Game of Thrones, A Night of the Seven Kingdom, The Hedge Knight. Could you imagine if that was the full title of the series?
Bad marketing. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about that. But were you guys like super excited? Like, were you like day one when it premiered on HBO? I'm assuming, guys, did you tune in for it? I mean, I was gonna say we were gonna talk about it. We talked about it, me and Dan, before you jumped on. The amount of television and film that you watch, kind of insane, my guy. I don't know
Very
how
impressive.
you do that. But were you there day one for A Night of the Seven Kingdoms?
Yeah, I was lucky enough. We don't have HBO Max in the UK for context. Well, it's arriving.
Sky?
Yeah, we have Sky and Now TV. But HBO is arriving this month, which is there's a lot of politics within that conversation. But I was invited by Sky to watch the first 2 episodes, and we had Dexter Solanso and Peter Claffey they did a Q&A afterwards after we watched the first 2 episodes. But going into the show, I hadn't had the book yet, so the book's here, and I've read some of it so far.
Nice.
But I hadn't read the book, so I had a friend who had maybe for 2.5 years been badgering me in my group chat, saying the Hedge Knight, Duncan Egg, I love a Duncan Egg story. Before they even announced the series, he was hammering every other day, Hedge Knight, Duncan Egg, and I was like, okay. I'm sure it's not going to compare to House of the Dragon or Game of Thrones. Watched the first, going into those episodes, I was optimistic because I was open to hearing and seeing something different from the universe that we hadn't been given before. I think there was a bit of fatigue from the back end of Game of Thrones and maybe bits of House of the Dragon season 2 with the general audience, but I was always kind of receptive to the way it was marketed or sold to us. Was it had a different comedic tone, and I think it would have been refreshing, or I had the mindset, sorry, that it would be refreshing to get a different perspective of Westeros rather than the Highborns and the princes, although that's debatable now. But the Highborns and the princes and the nobles, I really enjoyed the idea of seeing something different. And I think those first 2 episodes delivered, but I didn't know where it would go after that, if that makes sense. Yeah.
What about you, Dan?
I was sort of down the middle. Like I said, when we kind of talked about, I feel like Game of Thrones, the original show, was long enough ago at this point that the disappointment there has people haven't forgotten, but there's not necessarily an immediate impact. But I think the general audience did not love House of the Dragon season 2, and I like I said, I liked it, but I do understand people's complaints and all. Definitely not perfect, but I think I kind of talked about this a little bit the other night. I think we're at this really interesting moment in TV where studios are trying to understand, they're trying to listen to audiences and understand what they actually want. I think we saw this with Star Wars, with Andor. Andor is this huge course correction. You look at the previous content up until then, there's a lot of misses. You look at, and this is not quite fair because I'm talking about something I haven't watched, but based on general opinion, I think people really liked Wonder Man, the MCU show. And from what I can tell, and I will speak to Agatha All Along. That's a show that I think people maybe it got some weird attention at first, weird negativity, but actually watching it, I think a lot of people enjoyed it. But it's a contained story. It's personal. It's about a character. It's like a character study. And I think with this too, like you don't have to have some big grand story. You don't have to have big CGI. You don't have to have big battles. It doesn't have to fit into the overarching universe in some way that's, super key jangly to like, give people a dopamine rush. Just tell a good story. Make
Yeah,
good characters, have good casting, have good writing, some fun editing, some fun music. People will enjoy it. It's not difficult. Like tell a good story. It doesn't have to be so much extra stuff. And when
yeah,
you stack these good stories together, eventually you'll look back and say, "Oh wow, we've built a pretty good universe, huh?" Like we have all these stories, we have all these characters to build from, and then you bring it together and you have something really cool.
yeah.
Um, so I think it's exciting. I wasn't particularly excited or unexcited, but was willing to give it time, and I'm really happy that I did. And I see, you know, I see studios trying to figure out what audiences want from television across a lot of big IPs, which I think is interesting.
Just something you said. I think you both said it, but I have a feeling that with TV in particular, and movies maybe to a lesser degree, I think when people go to the cinema these days and in today's world, people might want a reason to go to the cinema. But I think with TV, I think studios are underestimating the idea that you don't have to have the entire audience or the whole world doesn't have to love your piece of art immediately. It can cultivate like a fan base over time. I think some of
Mhm.
the shows that tend to do that are they then become the big IPs or the bigger pieces of art that people tend to love. Game of Thrones, in my opinion, wasn't necessarily a huge juggernaut immediately. It took time to cultivate a fan base. I'd say I have a show called, well, as you guys might know, I love The Wire. I think it's one of the greatest TV
Mhm.
shows, if not the best. That series wasn't necessarily a huge hit until the series finished its run in 2008, I think it is. And then afterwards, it sort of picks up steam and people fall in love with it for various reasons. And I think sometimes that's okay. The immediate success doesn't have to arrive. I understand there's a lot of money that goes into these things and a lot of people stock
Pressure. Yeah.
shareholders, stocks, but I don't know. I come from the art perspective or the love for the medium. Sorry, so maybe I'm maybe I'm a bit foley in my thoughts, but yeah,
No, I don't think you are at all. And I think like what you're talking about is having actual confidence in the project. And I think you can feel confidence in projects and confidence in tone, confidence in storytelling. And you see stories that are just willing to be themselves. And if people like it, cool. If they don't like it, whatever, man. Like, and I think when you do that, a lot of people tend to like it because they can feel an a project that knows what it is and has a reason to exist. Whether you believe that or not, it's up to you. But the authenticity is there. So um, I think people are tired of inauthentic, synthetic, corporate projects, and they want to see like real storytelling, which is what this is.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's a certain IP that's being adapted that was talked about today that Dan knows. We talked about it a little bit on the phone the other day that I'm currently like in the midst of, which is God of War. So knowing that Amazon Prime, and I think when it comes to the series of Fallout, now I haven't played Fallout, but I believe a lot of Fallout fans are super happy with that series because they realize that there necessarily isn't a like straightforward story in the games. They just used the world of the games and created their own story within it. That's different when it comes to God of War, but just I think they are figuring things out. Now, when it comes to the adaptation, I mean, you'd be able to tell me, Gaz, Outlander. Have you watched Outlander?
I
Okay.
haven't.
Have you watched For All Mankind on
That's
Apple
another one that
TV?
I've been told that I need to watch. I
Okay.
haven't. Yeah,
I know it's getting five. I know it's gotten 5 seasons. So, in my opinion, Outlander got a lot of seasons. So maybe this isn't always true because you have like Grey's Anatomy and all that shit on TV that's been there for forever. But if you get more seasons, probably the show is good or people are tuning into it. So that gives me a little bit of hope. Anyways, that is who is doing the show running when it comes to the God of War series is the person behind
mm,
Outlander For All Mankind, which is why I brought
Wait,
that up.
have you watched Outlander still?
I have not. I know it's weird. Don't they
I
like
love it.
transport back in time?
It's very cool. Yeah,
Oh, okay, there you go.
it's like a I don't remember if she's from the 19th or 20th century, but this woman who's a doctor um goes back in time and she meets this Scottish Highlander, and they fall in love, and it's really good. It's a little bit soap opera-y, but I don't mind that at all. It's definitely like a heavy romance, but I think the romance is great. Their chemistry is really good,
Okay.
and the story it tells is pretty good, and it's good drama, sometimes very intense, very sad, pretty violent, but I think Outlander's a really fun show. It's really well done.
That gives me hope then for God of War, because it is confusing, because as we talked about, Dan, this is there are two modern day God of War movies. There's the one that came out in 2018 that won Best Game Award, and then there's God of War Ragnarok, which came out in 2022. This series is casting people from both of those games, which is a little bit confusing. So I don't know how, because it's their own stories. I'm actually halfway through God of War Ragnarok right now. Like Thor has been cast,
Mhm.
but you don't see Thor in the first God of War game from 2018. You see him in Ragnarok, which is what I'm playing right now. So I'm curious how they're going to blend both of those stories together. But the thing is, which Dan was talking about, that gives me hope. God of War, the story from the first game is very intimate, which is crazy to say that. It is basically The Last of Us, but with Norse mythology,
Mhm.
because it's literally the story just about a father and a son and their relationship and how they're dealing with the loss of their mother. And Kratos is very rude to his kid at the very beginning, and his kid is super freaking annoying. And it's like their journey together makes their relationship eventually unfold in a beautiful way. So the fact that it's so drama heavy, and you say, Dan, that showrunner does a good job with that, does give me hope. But speaking of showrunner, I was trying to look at Ira Parker, who is the showrunner of Game of Thrones, and seeing like how he, showrunner of Game of Thrones, showrunner of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, and how he came to this project. And from what I've seen, he did write one episode in House of the Dragon, but that's about it. I can't remember off the top of my. It was the 4th episode of season 1 was the only thing he wrote for the show. But besides that, guys, I don't know if you've watched any of these series. The Nevers, he wrote 6 episodes of The Nevers. That was another HBO Max series, it looks like. And he also wrote hold on. He wrote 8 episodes on a series called Better Things, which was on FX back in 2019. So I guess they really liked him from that one game, House of the Dragon episode. And they're like, you can become the whole showrunner of this entire series. So good on him. I mean, a lot of people have said what the success of the show has been is the fact that Ira from the beginning was like, I'm going to follow George R.R. Martin's work to a T. And I don't know if you guys know about it a little bit more, and you can even educate me on it. Do you know the whole drama that's going on right now with like the House of the Dragon showrunner and George R.R. Martin? Like, what's happening?
From what I can tell, the relationship is just totally fractured, correct?
Oh,
yeah, it's done. There is no relationship.
Now, why is that? Because they're going to do their own thing.
So initially, from what I gathered, George and Ryan got along really well, and funnily enough, Ryan Condal recommended Ira Parker for A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. I'm pretty sure that's the case. But they had a really good relationship in season 1 of House of the Dragon. But I think George felt into season 2, and from what he saw of season 3, the work that he's put onto page hasn't been stayed true. And when he gave his recommendations to HBO and to Ryan Condal about where he thinks some things should be, certain characters should be here, but they're not here. I think, for example, Daron, which is Alicent's child, it doesn't really appear in season 2. That was a gripe that he had because Daron's quite an important character. He's a dragon rider, so that's a big part of. He would play a big part in the battle going forward. So George just had really plenty of issues with the lack of, I guess, the team listening to his work. I think there was a point where his relationship with HBO was cut off as well, and he had no part in season 3, to my knowledge. So that's where a lot of the fan base are quite worried about season 3. And then when you couple that with the ending of season 2 of House of the Dragon, and then we had the strikes, which impacted the show as well. It cut down to 8 episodes. It kind of ends on a. I don't know if you guys felt the same, but episode 8 of season 2 felt like 3 or maybe 2 episodes were meshed together and then made into one episode, rather than the 10 episodes which I feel were made, and then for whatever reason they couldn't put together in the end. But Yeah, that's the long and short of the drama. There is no relationship between Ryan Condal and George R.R. Martin. I do think it's tough to sometimes adapt TV from, well, a book to a series or a movie because certain things just don't correlate or certain things don't work. But George is very stubborn, as you guys might have heard or seen.
What's your kind of take on that, Gaz? Like, do you tend to find yourself falling on one side or the other of that
Mm,
argument, or how do you feel?
Um, I feel for George because at the end of the day, this is. I'm gonna sound like I'm playing a very centralist role here, but I do
That's
feel
fine. Yeah.
in terms of this is his work. His work is being adapted, and I think he would like to see it stay as true to page as possible. At the same time, I understand it's not necessarily always easy to adapt everything from book to page, and I think that's the weird duality where I don't think, from what I can gather anyway, there isn't necessarily 100% right person or wrong. Ideally, you would like to see George's work brought to life and to page or to screen, sorry, um, word for word, but it's not realistic, I think. I'm still looking forward to season 3. I'm just going to take season 3 for what it is rather than expecting a perfect adaptation. Give me a good series of TV that's well written, the characters are fleshed out, we get a start, middle, and end, and we know where we're heading for season 4. If it's not true to page, I would still take a good season of TV.
I think that a Night of the Season or Night of the Seven Kingdoms might have just been really detrimental to House of the Dragon season 3 because I understand why Game of Thrones fans are super worried about House of the Dragon season 3
Yeah,
because you just got an entire series, 6 episodes that were trying to stay as true as possible to George R. R. Martin's work, and everyone loved it. The average, I think, is 8.9 on IMDb. Everyone really likes the show who's a fan. So
Mhm.
you have a very recent example of George R. R. Martin's work adapted 95% of the way. And then you think back to the ending of Game of Thrones, where people had to write their own stuff and they didn't have George R. R. Martin's work to go off of. And you're like, I would much rather have someone who stays true than somebody who writes their own thing. Now, obviously, when it came to Game of Thrones, they really didn't have an option. They had to do that. But like you guys, what you're saying is true. Obviously, you can't adapt some stuff one for one, especially Night of the Seven Kingdoms is a lot easier because it's a lot smaller of a show. It's really just in one location the entire time. But the fact that there's no relationship there at all is worrisome,
Boring, yeah.
personally, as a fan.
I also will say, maybe to play devil's advocate, like quality is not always necessarily dictated by faithfulness to source material or the pleasure of the creator. Like, for example, I think one of the best examples is the Watchmen TV show from 2019,
Oh, yeah.
which I is one of my favorite. When I think about limited series, like Midnight Mass, um, is up there, and that Watchmen show I absolutely love. Alan Moore hates it. Hates it.
Yeah,
Completely disowned it, said it was garbage, said he didn't understand why anyone liked it. And I think it's interesting because it's not necessarily his Watchmen, but it's taking those ideas and it's building something else upon it, and it's bringing on this idea with Rorschach around white supremacy and how those ideas could be twisted. And it's self-admittedly twisting the ideas of that's the whole fucking point, right? That's the point of the fucking show. It's about how ideas can be taken and twisted into something else when they are kind of in this weird gray area, and then the reaction to that. And I think it's a beautiful show,
yeah,
but he hates it. And that doesn't mean his graphic novel's bad all of a sudden. It doesn't mean, the show's bad. It's just both things can be good, and he cannot like it and feel that way, but you can do that, and get away with it. It's just people are going to feel how they're going to feel, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad.
yeah, for sure.
All right, maybe we should start trying to get into a Night of Seven Kingdoms here. I say we're like halfway through our recording time. So basically the synopsis is pretty simple. Well, we got Sir Dunk. Actually, he is Sir Dunk, supposedly at the beginning, if he got knighted or not. And he wants to compete in the tournament, but he needs people to remember Sir Arlen of Pennytree. That's a terrible accent. I'm so sorry. Meets Egg along the way, and things unfold at this tournament. Very unexpected things that Dunk was not intending to happen. We talked about Ira Parker a little bit, the showrunner, but then also the cast of this. I think all of them should be mentioned. I mean, you got Peter Claflin as Sir Duncan the Tall. You had Dexter Sol Ansel as Egg, Finn Bennett as Aerion Targaryen. Who else we got here? Who do I want to mention?
Daniel Ings.
Lionel Baratheon. Holy shit, great casting
Yeah.
there. I'm trying to think who played Baelor here. I'm trying to see his name. Oh, Bertie Carvel.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna stop with the cast names right there. I don't want to butcher anybody else. But yeah, what do you guys want to start with? Because we're not going to do spoiler-free review. We're just going to talk about the show and as much as possible as we can. Is there anything you guys want to talk about? First off,
I think it might be good to might be an interesting place to start to just deal with at a high level what you think this show has to say. Like I think kind of the why it exists or what you feel you get from it. And how it connects to you on like an emotional level. I think that would be an interesting place to start. If you want to start us off, Gaz.
I think the series is saying a lot of things. The first thing I took from the series is a knight. A knight isn't necessarily somebody that is the best fighter or the most skilled person. And I think to survive in that world, it does require that to some degree, to be a skilled swordsman like a Jaime Lannister or a Barristan Selmy or who else can I think of? Sir Bronn to some degree. I think you're saying a knight is about who you are as a human being, and I think Dunk does make it very clear that his perspective of a knight is somebody that will stand up for people that can't stand up for themselves, and I think it's something that he's trying to remind people of what that is as well. He's trying to remind the people of Westeros, of the people in Ashford Meadow, what a knight is, and I think it's so interesting that across, I think we see who he is in is it the 5th or 6th episode when we have the flashback. A lot of people were complaining, half the it's episode 5. People were complaining, we don't need a flashback, and we already know who Dunk is. But I think to see the pattern of him standing up for people that can't stand up for themselves just adds a slightly more context to who this person was and who he's become and how he stayed true to himself throughout that time period. I also do find it, I'm now going to attack it from a different perspective, but I also find the Targaryens a fascinating family. And I didn't necessarily care about the Targaryens initially in Game of Thrones. Daenerys was a really cool character, and I had some issues with the way she was written towards the end, but she was a really cool character. But I didn't have this sort of fascination with who they were. I think it only really became an interest for me in House of the Dragon. And I think we're now seeing through A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, one, a different perspective of what a Targaryen is or can be, and two, who they are without what they were, which is the mystical white hair dragons, dragon riders. Who are the Targaryens without that? Should they still be ruling the Seven Kingdoms because they have the dragons, or can they rule the Seven Kingdoms without the dragons? And I think Baelor's a great character, or a great example of someone who isn't necessarily a full Targaryen by blood, but still a great man. And there's so much I could go into, but yeah, I found the Targaryen aspect of it, and I guess what is a knight are the two things that stood out to me.
And I like what you just said about the Targaryens, because I feel like you kind of get the feeling as the more you watch them, and it kind of reminds me of a sort of a monologue that Cersei has at one point when she's talking to, I want to say she's talking to Jaime when they're talking about what power is, and she tells her guards to kill him. And then she says, "Oh no, stop! Sorry, guys. It's Littlefinger.
Yeah.
It's Littlefinger. Yes. Because he's kind of trying to like, be passive aggressive and swipe at her and make his little comments and is a little bit high on himself. And she says, "All right, kill him."
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, "That's power." And I feel like that reminds me of what the Targaryens are. They're just people with fucking dragons. So what are you gonna do? Like, what are you gonna do? And I feel like when you have that level of you're that untouchable, right? I think it creates these people who have this idea that they're just superior because they happen to have this relationship with the most powerful entity in this world. But then once that's gone, and you still have this ego and sense of superiority, um, you're prone to things like rebellions, right? Which we ultimately see in Game of Thrones. But something I enjoy in this show is you see Lionel, who's a Baratheon, like already hinting at wanting to rebel. Like that's I don't think that's in the novels, but he's talking about fuck the Targaryens, like you and me, let's get together. And there's an underlying thing there of let's stand up to these people, which is really cool because we're only, in the grand scheme of things, I think it's like 70 or 80 years apart from the events of the show, which takes place after the rebellion's already done. So kind of
Mm.
cool, but I think I like that you touched on that because we see a wide range of Targaryens in this show, and we see, and Stone made a really good video about this. It's really a show about people battling against their own identity or their own designated place in society, and either trying to step up or step down, and trying to hide their true identity um, as they do that, which is really cool, and it's across multiple people. But something I loved in the last episode was seeing Egg, seeing his hair grow back, and it's a little subtle thing, but like you see that, and it's tied directly to him thinking about murdering his brother, which Aaron is evil, but should this kid stab his brother to death as he's laying there in bed? Would that be good for him? Would that be a noble act? No. Um, but it's a Targaryen act, and it's from a place of like rage, um and they tie that to his hair going back, and him trying to battle his nature and keep himself who he is, and kind of using Dunk as an anchor to the real world and to people and to humanity, and um and all of that, and knowing the king that he'll become, and what type of king he is. I think it's a beautiful story, and it is a little simple story, but it also means a lot to Westeros, like the show does as a whole. Even seeing like the death of Baelor is a huge moment because he was heir to the throne, uh, and that kind of kicks off everything else that comes after it. So it's really interesting, and it is small scale, but it's also very big and grand in its own way in terms of what it's doing.
Stone, I have a question for you. Did you actually to both of you, but did you guys feel as though you could connect to characters? Let's use Baylor as an example. I would say we have less than 30 minutes screen time with Baylor Breakspear, yet I feel as though so many people connected to that character for varying reasons. What do you think the effectiveness of the writing for Baylor was and the acting, I guess, that led to people connecting with him despite the fact he's, as I said, probably on screen for less than 30 minutes?
It's like what Dan talked about in my video that I made. I think this show makes you invested so much because you have an idea of what Westeros is and how like a family like the Targaryens operates, that when somebody steps out of line like that in a good way, automatically that makes them extremely likable just because of the status quo that's been set in this world. So the fact that you see a Targaryen who, because that's him stepping up for Sir Dunk, it's not the only time that gets you like, oh, I really like this guy. It's because he's the only person that remembers Sir Arlen Pennytree. Like that is, he automatically helps this character that you have been falling in love with for, I think it's 2 episodes now.
Yeah.
And automatically that's one thing that makes you like him. And then obviously he's not like his brother, Maekar, and he doesn't like his nephews that much. So it's like one thing on top of another of the 30 minutes that truly makes you really feel for that guy. And I didn't get to talk about it, but like one thing I think the show does such a good job of is I feel like it puts you in the stands like you're watching this tournament, like you're a person like hanging out with everybody, because what this show is at its bare bones is just trying to make you fall in love with Dunk. I know Egg's a big part of it and the relationship's a big part of it, but Egg only stands up for Dunk because he cares for him.
Yeah.
Right. Baelor only stands up for Dunk because he cares for him. Those 6 knights who fight for him in the seven trials or whatever, only stand up for him because they like him. And this show needs to convince us of
Right.
why they would put their faith and their lives on the line for this guy. And it does a very good job of that. So when somebody dies because of that, who's been given 30 minutes of screen time, it's really effective, especially by the way that Dunk tears himself down about the situation.
Yeah.
Like that's just another layer on top of it. You're like, holy shit. And especially like episode 6, where I get why people are upset at him. It is super unfair because obviously it wasn't Dunk's say whether Baylor got to compete in the trial of 7 or not, but they're like, that was our one chance to have a good king, dude, and you fucked it up. I do not care. I do not care if you would have died because I would rather have that guy alive. And that's such a burden that this person now has to carry on for however long the show goes on. And that's such an interesting thing to be weighing on the mind of this character.
It's a great point you make. Yeah. I also find it interesting that because you guys may be aware, but Baylor's part Dornish. His mum was Maria Martell.
Yep.
Yeah, and I find that aspect so interesting. He doesn't have the privilege, quotation marks, of having the silver white hair or the dragons, whereas I think some of the other Targaryens, like an Aerion, for example, are, and he's young, but he's overcompensating, I think, and tries to sort of sell the fact he's a Targaryen. I think you see that in the armor that he wears and the way he carries himself, the way his hair is so sort of silver, blonde, white. But whereas Baelor's comfortable who he is, and he's understanding of, maybe because he is Dornish and he's a marriage of like politics, he's understanding of what the world might need, whereas other people aren't necessarily considerate of that, like a Maekar Targaryen, for example. But I also think Daeron, who is his father, is also quite a good man, quotation marks. So that might have played a role as well.
Yeah, and this show is so interesting because this show is operating in the shadow of the Blackfire Rebellion. And I think like when you think about what that was about, like the issues that were presented there are like still seeping into the show, and you see it brought up a good amount. You see I think in the flashback you see a trader refuse to buy something that had the mark of it on it, and basically the entirety of the Blackfire Rebellion was about Targaryen supremacy. Like it was essentially about Targaryen purity and having this incestuous bastard leading this rebellion against Daeron and Miria because like he saw them as unpure. Like he saw them as having he thought Doran had far too much influence on politics, and you know Baelor is the product of that, and you see kind of like that the kindness and patience and just nature of his mother in him, but like him just existing is tied to the whole reason that rebellion happened in the first place. And it's interesting to see him contrasted with someone like Aerion, who has still a little bit of that blood in him as well, but has just totally given himself over to this Targaryen arrogance. And the contrast there is really interesting. And you see Maekar as kind of in between, right?
Yeah.
Maekar kind of serves as this halfway point between the two, which is interesting to me.
Yeah, he's not like super evil, which I respect the show for like showing that. He just wants what's best for his kid. He's like, I don't want Egg to go away, not because I'm like, I want to keep him from what he wants. It's because he's my last chance of having a good child. Like I want to keep that's one thing about this show. It kind of reminds me of the Lannisters from Game of Thrones in a weird way. The Targaryens really just care, and they always have, kind of, when it, also when it comes to the power of the realm, but about their family. Like they're really, really a tight-knit group of people. And I like that Maekar's like, dude, I just fucking killed my brother on accident. Like he's like, I didn't mean to do that. And I'm devastated by that. And now my son wants to leave me. I'm like, I kind of get his point of view. Like this guy's life isn't great right now, even though he could have really stopped all this if he had been a better father.
Yeah, but you mentioned as well that he's aware that Aerion is not necessarily the nicest of children. There's a self-awareness there of who and what his son is. So the moment where Egg walks into the room, he's aware of the pain that Aerion might have put Egg through. We don't necessarily know what, but I think it's somewhat alluded to that there was bullying, and Egg was sort of picked on by Arion, and everyone gives off that aura anyway that he's not the nicest of young children. But then you can understand, he understands why Egg walked in with the knife, and he felt the pain that Egg was feeling, but he still loves his son Arion. there's multitude of feelings within that one scene.
I think I think he also understands that Egg is associating this entire string of events with now him not being able to serve as Dunk's squire, and like that's all he wants is to be close to his friend, and he sees that what has happened has caused that to, at least in that moment, no longer be reality. But I loved that moment, was really nice, and just him seeing that and treating him kindly, I thought was really powerful. Um, and I thought was a really good character moment for Makar, who had a lot of really good character moments in episode 6, because like, he may be a bit nicer, but he's still sort of cruel. He's not
Yeah.
really a nice person. But
It's
you
way
are
more
able
interesting to have a character like that. Like,
yeah. Yes,
a
with
lot of
nuance.
nuance there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And you're able to still see him as a father and a person.
So that's the only time we actually get to see them on screen together. I might be wrong. I don't recall any other moment where we see Egg and Makar together.
It's their most substantial moment at the least. It's the only
Okay.
one that sticks in my mind.
I want to speak about a little bit of a controversy of the show, which is not a controversy. I guess it is a thing in the book. And me and Dan have talked about it, and we thought we made our decision on this plot point of the series because of a certain scene. But it's whether or not Dunk has actually been knighted by Sir Arlen of Pennytree. Now, I talked about that. I was like, oh, for sure. They had that flashback in the last episode. He's like, why didn't you knight me? And then all of a sudden, Sir Arlen of Pennytree woke up, and then maybe he knighted him after that. So I guess it is a thing within these stories that it's always left ambiguous by George R.R. Martin whether or not Dunk has been knighted. And I think on the surface, that is super interesting. Not even on the surface. It is very fascinating because you have this person who you believe is the best moral character in the entirety of Westeros. But who he is, his stature, who he presents himself as, might be a lie that he's just continuing with. But what I think it would be interesting, Dan pointed out that there is, I believe, at the beginning of episode 5, the Trial of 7, when they're going to knight Raymond to make him one of the people in the
End
Lionel.
of 4. End of 4.
Then of 4. Yes,
Yeah.
Lionel decides to knight him instead. There does seem to be some hesitation by Dunk that he's like, I don't feel right doing this, which would connect to him not actually being a genuine knight and having that done to himself. But what I would find it super fascinating is that we say that all Egg wants to do is squire. He didn't even purposely want a squire necessarily, maybe for Dunk. He just saw a knight and he's like, this guy looks fun. Let me go knight for him. Because that's all he wanted. He wants to have some fun at a tournament, right? Who knows? Maybe after that, he would have just went on his way to been a Targaryen. He wanted to have a one-time thing, but because he connects with Dunk so much, now he's sticking around with him. I would find it super interesting if we get confirmation that Dunk actually hasn't been knighted at all, and he confesses that to Egg, what Egg's response would be to that.
Yeah.
I think that would be extremely fascinating. I don't know what the character would do. I obviously think at the end they would be okay, but he was raised in a royal family where there are titles all over the place. So, and he trusts, and the whole thing is like, Dunk lied to Egg, or Egg lied to Dunk, right? You're a Targaryen, you didn't tell me that. Dunk could be lying to Egg, and we just never find out.
I think he is.
That's a problem for me.
But I think it's interesting, and I think there's a lot of discourse to me around this that I find a bit confusing. But one thing I'll say, when I made a video talking about it, I had people. I think people took it as I was saying this is a negative about Dunk. I don't give a shit. Like, I think the show works much better if he's not knighted. I think that's the entire
100%.
fucking point of the show, right? Like that's why the show exists. But I have people say like, oh, well, just because he's not a knight doesn't mean. But I'm like, chill out. I agree with you. Like, I'm not saying anything negative about him. I'm just saying. And I've had people say why. I've heard people say why would he lie? I think that's like asking why did Rowan lie in episode 6? Like, these people do not have a path towards a higher social standing by being themselves, and they can in this type of society,
Mm.
as a peasant or as a lower born woman as well, you can't just change. And it's like the movie A Knight's Tale, you can't just change your stars. And even in A Knight's Tale, he has to have the king show up and say, this guy has royal blood that's ancient, and you can't, don't worry about it. And that's the only way. Like, there's a happy ending, but the happy ending comes through this imaginary confirmation of blood. You know what I mean? Still, despite the message of the story. Um, so I think it's interesting because the worst, I use that, I'm not saying that, but the worst thing about Dunk is that he is a liar in terms of who he says he is. But the
Yep.
only way, like, all he wants is to do good and to have a positive impact on the world, and the path towards doing that is this knighthood. Um, so it's a very interesting conundrum for the character, and it's part of why the writing is so good. But he did get very upset with Egg for not revealing he was a Targaryen, so there is a bit of hypocrisy there for sure.
Yeah. So that might make you think the other way, right? Because we were like, okay, that scene at the end of 4, he's obviously hasn't been knighted. But then if he gets so upset at Egg about such a big lie, you would think that maybe he doesn't have a lie himself that's just as big, really, in the context of the show.
But
It is
sometimes I
fascinating.
think we get most upset at seeing ourselves and other people, right? Isn't that? I feel like don't we? I think that sometimes that's the
Oh,
case where
interesting.
the thing that will bother you the most is the thing on some level you're aware of yourself doing. Um, and I think it could be a case of that as well.
Right, because he sees himself in Egg. He doesn't want Egg to have, or he wants to teach Egg basically what he has learned in life. So I think like he's like, don't fucking lie like me or whatever.
Yeah.
Like being honest, man. And I think it is interesting how we always Sir Arlen of Pennytree. I think it's so fascinating how Dunk thinks so much of him, and he's kind of a piece of shit a lot of times from our perspective. He's like, yeah, he gave me a good clout in the air when I needed it, and we just see him like beating him, and he doesn't necessarily take the best care of him, but it's like it's small little details and how he conducts his life
He's a
that
drunk.
yeah, I think it's so
Yeah. I
fascinating
mean,
how Dunk thinks he's one of the best knights he's ever seen because that's the only example he has of a knight. He hasn't seen anybody else.
I also think
Re-
I also think Dunk is well aware that he's somewhat a piece of shit. He's aware of the flaws of Pennytree, but there are key moments within their time together where Pennytree was there for him when no one else was or could be.
Very true.
So for example, in episode 5, yes, when we get the flashback and we see he's just lost Rafe, yes, the young girl Rafe, and the only person there for him to take him out of the situation where he possibly would have lost his life was Sir Arlen of Pennytree. And similarly to Egg, to some degree, he sort of not bothered Pennytree, but followed him around and was sort of lurking around without the warmth and the grace that he would have wanted from Pennytree. But during the moments where he really needed Sir Arlen of Pennytree, he was there for him where no one else was, where he lost his mother. He had nothing because he's from Flea Bottom, which is one of the poverty-stricken aspects of the 7 kingdoms, 9 kingdoms, depending on perspective. So I think those moments stayed with him. And together with your point about he didn't have any other really or real true examples of what a knight was. I think those two marry together.
I think the point also of the show and the point that they're making with Pennytree is like you don't have to be perfect. Like the idea of the perfect knight that Dunk is chasing doesn't exist, and like
Yeah.
that concept is perfectly displayed in the death of Baelor, because Dunk stood up and did the noble thing, standing up for Tansel. That was the right thing to do. And you know what? Westeros loses a fucking king that would have been good to everyone because of that. Like in
Yeah.
real life, these perfect people in perfect situations don't exist, but you try to make the best choices you can day by day. And sometimes things will go horribly because of that. But should he not have stood up for her? Should he let her be beaten? No. Like he still did the right thing, but sometimes reality is reality. So I feel like while Arlen may not have been like a perfect man, we see in that flashback, he stood up for these 2 kids when he was blackout drunk, and he fights 2 gold cloaks and kills them. Like He didn't have to do that. He could have just walked away and said, "This isn't worth my time." But he saw injustice and he did something about it. Um, and at the end of the day, like I think it's your actions that define you, not being rough around the edges or imperfect. And I think also they show he does have a problem with alcohol, which affects a lot of his uh how he kind of carries himself and some of the things that he does. But
It's also a reflection of the real world, though, right? Where maybe I'm looking too deeply into it, but we see examples in the world of people who might struggle with that kind of thing, any kind of addiction, but deep down, there's someone that's a good human being there. They're just struggling with
yeah,
something. I think we see that with Sir Alan for sure.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think it's
agreed.
fascinating. In order to prepare for this episode, what I did is I went back and I listened to the cast and the crew on those, which I love this. I wish more series did this, but the whole like basically after the episode where they talk about the entire episode and things like that. And Ira Parker, he when Baylor dies, he's like, the sucky thing about Westeros is that when people do the good thing, that's usually what happens. It's not the proper way the world works or this world works. And I thought it was fascinating how they were talking about at the beginning of this series, what Dunk wanted was to be the perfect night or what he thought the perfect night would have been. And I think maybe at the beginning, he even wanted, he's like, well, what if I get attached to a noble family, something like that? And then he has this tie in with the Targaryens. And he's like, at the very end, he even has that option, right? Because Makar was
Go to
like, you can
Summerhall.
come,
Yeah,
you can come and we'll finish your training and you can be next to Egg like you want to be, and we'll have that for you. And he's like, no, I don't want to be around you guys, respectfully. And something that that popped out to me, to be honest, I didn't realize how big of a moment it was until I listened to those recaps, was when Dunk is talking. I think he even told Egg, he's like, no, I can't hang out with you anymore. We can't be together anymore in episode 6. And he has that conversation with Darren. And it looks like kind of like a pub area. And he's like, I'm sorry about your brother. And he's like, nah, he's always been a shit anyways. He's like, Egg's a good man. He's like, no, I wasn't talking about Egg. He was talking about Arian.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, don't worry, we'll help Egg out. He'll become, we'll try to make him into the man we want him to be or anything like that. And that's when Dunk's like, fuck, if I don't take this kid with me, he's going to end up exactly like his older brothers.
Yep.
And he's like, I've got to try. Which I thought was very, very telling.
Yeah, the Seed of the Dragon. I mentioned that in a video that I made, I think, talking about episode 6. Daron is well aware of what a Targaryen is. I don't think Daron was saying necessarily that because you have the seed or the blood of the dragon that's who you will be, but it's the proximity to the power and the influence and the entitlement and the servants and the waiters that could potentially make you that way. And I think, as he said, Aerion wasn't always this way. The same way when we meet Aegon and Aemond in House of the Dragon season 1, they weren't bad kids initially. It's that proximity to the dragons and that sense of entitlement and the way they're sort of propped up as the heirs to the throne, which can then cultivate that. And I think Egg is maybe potentially aware of that as well, which is why he maybe I'm going to argue here, maybe why he ran away initially and why he wants to remain alongside Dunk. And then when he sees Aerion arrive at Ashford Meadow, there's this sort of realization that he's there in front of me again alongside Baylor and Makar. I find the writing for this, that's an aspect of the writing for the Targaryens that I find so fascinating, is that proximity to power versus who you could be versus who you will be, depending on proximity. Yeah.
I don't think it's coincidence how the two most educated Targaryens are the only good ones, which is Baelor and Egg. Like, Egg for his age is super smart. And I think that's very much on purpose because obviously Dunk is not very intellectual himself. So you'll have a smart Targaryen and a pretty dumb Hedge Knight in combining the two of them. So I think that the fact that he is so young and he's like, I want to get away from this family. I want to go see the world because I'm just going to be messed up if I stay here is absolutely correct.
It's so interesting you say that because I think it's interesting to see education as a factor in terms of helping people to not act in an ignorant fashion. And I think I don't want to go off on a big tangent here, but we just had Wuthering Heights come out. And in the novel, one of the big things that happens to Heathcliff is he's studying, like he's educating himself. And when Catherine's father dies in the novel, basically her brother takes over and he ends his education, says you cannot be educated anymore, and he puts him out basically as a servant. And that, like, the loss of education is the moment that basically sends him spiraling, and he understands
Um,
that education is the path, like, forward and the path ahead socially for him. And then fast forward to the end of the novel, Kathy's daughter ends up helping Heathcliff's son that he had with Isabella become educated, and they bond together,
mm,
and they are, it's weird, they're cousins, it's odd, but they come together in that way, they come together romantically, and she teaches him and helps him learn, and he's able to step up in society through that. So I think seeing that, hearing you talk about that just made that pop into my head. I think that's interesting because Egg definitely has an intelligence that
yeah.
stands out.
My favorite moment with like the clashing of their intelligence, I've watched this scene like a million times, is the one where he's like, people always used to call me stupid. He's like, well, what did you cue when they called you stupid? He's like, what business of that is yours? And Egg's like face where he's like, he's
What?
like, the fuck? He's like, I'm just asking a question. It's so good. I cannot, the casting, like I know everyone's talked about it, but these two guys
Yeah.
are unbelievably good. Like I could never imagine someone else playing these roles. But
Yeah.
then also
Yeah.
like the supporting cast, like I think her name, you called her Rowan, but I thought it was Red. Is her name Rowan in the show?
It's
Just
it's her actual name is Rowan. She goes by Red as,
Okay.
or her name is Red, and then she calls herself Rowan. She
Oh, at
says
the end.
she says she's associated with her, and the other thing is the actor's actual name is Rowan, which is funny.
Yeah, I'm
But
looking at it right now, so I'm very confused.
I think that's it. And she says she's from a particular house that's very well to do. I can't remember the house, but that's kind of the lie. But she ends up being fairly important as
Yeah.
a yeah.
Raymond, I
Yeah.
love Raymond too, dude. And then like some like
Mhm.
person you wouldn't really think of that does like pop up, and every time he pops up, like the blacksmith, like his name's Steely Pate, like when he's there with Baylor, I just like that there's like this little family, it feels like, of people. I will say one thing that pissed me off that I didn't think about, and I should have known it was coming, but was when Sir Stefan Fossaway, when he did his whole like tricked you, haha, I'm going over there. I should have expected that because I don't know why I was like, oh, this guy's actually acting like a good guy now. I don't know why. Maybe I thought that he like fell in love with Dunk like everyone else had. So I'm like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it
Slimy
made sense for his
Yeah,
choice.
he's a slimy guy. I think you guys mentioned the casting, and as I said, I think Bertie Carver was Baylor, really exemplified or caught the essence of the character. Where I think even he said Baylor isn't necessarily a perfect guy, but he's definitely the best of the best, and there is humanity in him, and he tries to convey that. And I think you see that in the moments where, for example, when episode 3, I think when Egg was caught in the lie, he did grill, or he did tell Egg off, but he's also well aware that Egg has suffered and that Egg is just a child. And I think he caught the duality of Baylor, who, as I said, I don't think he's I don't think he's like the purest of human beings that will ever exist, but there is tons of amounts of humanity and understanding and compassion. And I think he captures that. And I think the Finn Bennett, who plays Arion, the complete opposite end of the spectrum, but really again embodies what Arion thinks a Targaryen should be and should look like. And then the way he wears his armor when he's taking part in the tourney, he really exemplifies what he thinks a Targaryen should be. And I think the casting has been superb. Yeah.
I saw them say that the reason why Arion wants this to happen is because he wants the people. He feels like he's like nobody respects the Targaryens right now because they have no dragons. So he sees this as a way that he can prop up his family name yet again by having this trial of 7. And I think I told Dan this on a live, Gaz, but something that you would find interesting. Do you know that Finn Bennett is about to be in a pretty big movie in theaters? About to star in a pretty big movie?
What would it be?
He's going to be in that movie, The Backrooms, from A24.
Oh, that's
Yes.
well, the trailer came out for that this week, no?
Yes. Yes. Chiwetel Ejiofor and Renata Reinsve is going to be in that too. But yeah, I'm excited for everyone to see him in that too.
Yeah, I wanted to go off of something Gaz just said. I'm forgetting. Oh, you're talking about Baylor. So there's an interesting moment in the beginning of episode 6. there's a very funny conversation. Like one thing I like about the show is it plays off. It is funny. Like there are a decent amount of funny moments, and it plays off a lot of like tropes of the genre. And the beginning of episode 6 is Lionel sitting with Dunk and a maester. And the maester's like, "Oh, his wounds are beyond my skill. Like he's gonna die." And then Lionel's like, "Yeah, go fuck yourself. Get away. Like he's fine." Which I thought was very funny. But Lionel basically has a monologue and says something that I think there's a lot of truth in.
It's one of my
And
favorite
he-
parts of the whole show, dude. I think it's so
yeah,
good.
and he basically says, you're so obsessed with the sacrifice of Baelor, like he should have been safe in that fight. He's fighting against Kingsguard and his family. Like nobody was going to touch him. Like he died essentially by accident. Um, and there is like while the action from Baelor is heroic and is admirable, there is truth in that. But I do think like a lot of what Lionel does, Lionel really likes Dunk, and I think Lionel has like a romantic fixation on Dunk. I think he like likes him in that way as well, and like he wants him to go away with him. And I think there's some like bitterness in hearing Dunk talk about Baylor because he's like, well, we helped you out too, and like I helped you.
Yeah.
So I think it's very interesting, another interesting dynamic. But while his point is bitter, I do think there's some validity to it in how he talks
100%.
about Baylor. Yeah.
And how
Um,
princes and knights are seen as well. Why is the death of this one prince, although he may have been a great king, why does
Yeah.
that matter more than the other people that might have lost their lives in the tourney or the trial of seven, or than anyone that passes away or loses their life across Westeros?
Right.
Why does that
And
matter?
this is a flaw you see in Dunk because he puts these
Yeah.
people on pedestals.
Yeah.
Like, and it's this internalized like classism that Dunk has, and you see it. And he even wonders if he did the right thing, and he wonders, he doesn't seem to feel that his life has value in comparison to the value of a noble.
He's not
which-
even thinking about those other guys, which is crazy.
Yeah, two
Yeah.
people lost their lives, I think.
Yeah, it was Humphrey Beesbury and Humphrey Harding.
Yeah, it's good writing. It's good writing for sure.
Just
Yes.
talking about the two of them, it reminds me of that moment where he's like, Lionel's like, "Why are you in my tent?" And he's like, "Supper." He's like, "Just try to eat, dude." It's so good. Oh man. So what do we know about season 2? Right. So season 2 is going to be adapting the next novel, and it's let's see here. It's going to be The Sworn Sword, and it's going to take place in Dorne, which is why they mentioned Dorne at the very end,
So
I
excited.
believe. And it's going to come out next year, which is incredible. If they can put out one of these a year, I love it. When you saw the cast, when you did a Q&A, when was that?
When did this show start? So it was mid-January. So maybe the third week of the month of Jan. I think maybe the second week. January the 15th, I think that day was. Yeah.
Did Dexter have hair?
No.
Okay, that's a good sign. That means they were filming.
I think they had maybe halted filming. He had a cold. Bless his soul. He came into the auditorium and he had a cold because I think he had traveled from maybe Italy to Berlin for HBO to do the promotion and so on and so forth, and then came to the UK. As you can imagine, that's so taxing on a 8, 9, 10-year-old.
I was just about to say, can you imagine doing that at like 10, 11 years old?
No.
That's crazy, dude.
Yeah.
The thing is, too, is the kid is so smart, too. I mean, that's why he's cast perfectly. He's a very smart kid.
Oh, he's very intuitive and very sharp and witty and great storyteller, great with words and just speaking. And I think he also understands he's a character. He's good at playing, not just playing, but he understands who he is and showcases that. Understands, I guess, the act of showmanship. He's really good at that. But he didn't have hair, but I think they'd halted filming maybe season 2 or were just getting into production for season 2. I know they're currently filming now, which is exciting. And you mentioned Dawn. Are you guys excited for Dawn? Because I don't think that's an aspect of the world they've touched on profoundly yet. We have Martell and his sister /
I said that is where Pedro Pascal's character is from, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I am excited for that because we didn't get too much time there. It was like his sister and like her 3 ninja women that were like assassins.
Yeah, the Sand Snakes. I think that's
yeah. So I feel like it was very much underutilized in Game of Thrones. So I am excited for an entire season of television to be set there. Definitely, it just feels different. It's like like where Daenerys is for the majority of Game of Thrones. Like it doesn't feel like Westeros. It feels like something otherworldly in a way.
Yeah, for sure, for sure, for sure. I haven't read the second book. I'm still trying to get myself through it, but I'm just very excited to again maybe a different perspective of the universe, Dawn, ideally from what I've been reading and seeing, and two, the characters where we met them at the start of season 1 isn't where we find them at the start of season 2, because they've been through so much together. They've been through treachery and lies and lost lives, but then they've also, I guess, strengthened their bond somewhat through understanding who each other was and currently are by the end of the season 1 heading into season 2, which I'm very excited for. And as we said, just to get a different perspective again of Westeros, this season 1 gave us bits of Flea Bottom and Ashford Meadow, which we've never really seen before, and we get to spend more time with the small folk. I would have liked a bit more time with them in season 1, but I think we get enough to have an understanding of the way Targaryens are viewed and the ruling class versus those that have nothing.
Yeah. It's such a good show. I wanted to mention one other thing. You mentioned that he's from Flea Bottom, which is also where Sir Davos is from, which is also where Gendry is from. And I feel like when you look at those three characters, there's so much similarity in terms of they're all strong fighters, especially Gendry and Dunk. Like Dunk doesn't have skill, which you see in the trial, but he has like brute strength, and he's a huge guy. I mean, Peter Claffey is a huge man as a rugby player, but also I mean, he was like taking acting classes as a professional rugby player on the side and like learning that crack. It's an incredible story. I really love it. And I believe he's Irish, which is great. And they shot the show in Belfast. But anyway, um, I just I feel like there's so many through lines with those three men in terms of their desire to do good
Yeah.
and their ability as fighters. I think that's really beautiful, given the fact that they're all from this place that's really difficult to come up. But it kind of speaks to all their character. I just wanted to say one final thought. There was so much discourse when this show was about to come out. Oh, the episodes are too short. Oh, they're 30 to 40 minutes. Oh, it's garbage. It's trash. Blah, blah, blah. Where are all those people at? I want to hear from those people who said the episodes are too short. They want more. Like, it's so foolish. And it was, there's a lot of ridiculous outrage on the internet. I understand it's the internet. It happens. It was the stupidest shit I've ever seen in my life. Like, tell a good story. It doesn't matter how long the episodes are. You saw Netflix or Stranger Things come out with bullshit ass 2 hour long Stranger Things episodes for what? How is that?
Nonsense.
Like, take whatever it is at face value, and if they're telling a good story, who cares? It doesn't matter. This was perfect. I don't know.
I'm with
I
you.
agree.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, and I think that we will not hear from people like that at the beginning of the second season.
No.
Everyone's going to be like, all right,
No.
we get it. It's pretty good if we just leave it as is.
Yes.
I'm excited though. In our outline before we started, I was talking about like medieval games, like stuff that happens at these tournaments. And I think I told you all before we jumped on that I'm going to medieval times tonight. I'm very curious what that's going to be like. Medieval times, for anybody who's listening, is like basically a medieval tournament, but you just like sit back, eat food, and watch it. I don't think it's going to be as extreme. I don't think we're going to have a Targaryen like stabbing their lance into like a horse and someone's leg getting broken. I am curious, but what sport fascinates you guys the most? Is it jousting? I feel like that's the sport of tournaments like this. You don't see archery. What if season 2 is surrounding archery? That'd just be boring. I'm
dubious if there will be much of that in season 2.
It's probably gonna be something different. Yeah.
I've heard season 2 is a bit less chaotic and violent than the book is a bit less chaotic and violent, because that's the interesting part. I didn't necessarily see where season 1 was heading. I didn't know.
Yeah.
I felt the first couple of episodes of the series were so heartfelt yet funny and mellow, and by the time we get to the end of episode 3, you really do see the Game of Thrones or the Song of Ice and Fire nature of this series.
Yeah.
But it still managed to maintain its core and heart and honesty within the context of the characters in the world. And I think it found such a beautiful tonal balance. And as long as it can do that for season 2 while still telling a different story, I'm more than happy to tag along for the ride, because it was great to be back in this world, but just a different perspective and way that we've not seen before.
Yeah, and I think there's very subtle ways that they created that tone. I think the music, we didn't really touch on it, but the music is brilliant. And
Yeah.
there's like a jazz segment in episode 6.
Yeah.
In episode 1, it's sort of this like Western whistling tune. It's stuff that catches your attention and says this is something different. There's some fun editing. It's a show that feels like it's its own thing, which I enjoyed. But
Do you guys have
um,
a standout moment from season 1? I don't know if you've mentioned it already, but do you have like a standout scene or character interaction? But
Like,
and the reason I ask is because the first 4 seasons of Game of Thrones for me, and Dan, you might attest to this watching it now. Some of the best moments are just one-to-one character interactions, whether it's Varys and Lady Olenna, or Cersei and Littlefinger, or Jamie and Tywin when Tywin's cutting the deer. I think some of those are the best. But anything stand out to you guys from season 1?
I talked about it already, but I loved the end of episode 4. Everyone focused on the moment with Baelor stepping up and coming out. That was very dramatic. But I loved um, just the entire scene of the Fossaway. Which Fossaway is that? Not Steven, right? The other Fossaway. Yeah,
Raymond?
of him stepping up and wanting to be knighted after the betrayal. I thought that was a good twist into a new piece of action that needed to be taken. But I feel like we talked about earlier, that moment showed me that Dunk is not a knight, and I thought it was such an important moment. And the moment also showed me that Lionel knows. Like Lionel sees right through. Like he looks right at him and he smirks, and he's like, "I'll do it." Like I thought that was just so well done. And then you get this very stylized sequence of Lionel knighting him, and the words are being said in the background, and then you have Dunk looking up. There's a little shot
So
of
good.
Egg. Egg is looking at Dunk right before he decides not to do it, and it's almost like, again, we're talking about he has to be an example to this kid. Like he is a father figure to this kid. He is largely responsible for him. And while he might not always make perfect decisions, the goal of him existing is to help this kid grow into the man that he needs to be for everyone. And while they were denied Baelor, they'll get Egg.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was all beautiful. And then kind of the humor of the show in showing Arlen and having him shrug, which I thought was very vague and very funny. I love that whole sequence so much. I think that's my personal favorite.
Yeah, and I already said mine, which was I love that me and Dan's is so different because it's the contrast of the interaction with Dunk and Egg when they're talking, and Egg gets that shrug. It's just like you have epic moments like Dan just mentioned, and then you have that really good humor between two very realized characters in the moment that just makes sense. It's very good writing, and the way that it blends humor, like in that moment, like Dan's saying, like it's there's so much going on. It's so epic. You have that voiceover from Lionel, which that guy has so much flair. That actor's so good. But then you just have the whole Arlen's like, about to get your ass kicked. Are you really a knight? Did I knight you?
Yeah.
What about yours, guys?
I'm gonna cheat and say I have 2. One kind of played into the tone of the early episodes where Dunk said to Egg, rob me, and something along with something about dogs. And Egg says,
"Oh, the barking."
Where? And he's robbed. and you see the sort of childlike nature of Egg from one of the I think the series does a really good job of showing you that Egg is very much well read and understands the context of the world, but he's still a child. And he happens in intimate moments like that scene where he jumps up, or the scene where he's crying in the corner and he feels like he's let down Dunk. And the other one is when Raymond Fossaway and Dunk are speaking just before Dunk punches Aerion. And I think Raymond says something along the lines of, those Targaryens are incestuous demons or something along those lines, which is I think he's reflecting the feeling of Westeros as a whole, which you can see with Lionel Baratheon, who says something similar, like, why do you care about him more than the rest of us that have stuck up for you, which is, I think that reflects the way the world is. I'm speaking from someone that lives obviously in a monarchy in England, and while I don't wish death on anybody, why does Prince Andrew or Prince Charles matter more than anyone else that lives in the country? The concept of monarchy does make me laugh, shall we say? So
Yeah, and it's coming at this time when the British monarchy is under such scrutiny with Andrew, and I mean the guy's a pedophile, just like Republicans in America, just like some Democrats in America, just like people all over the world, just like monarchs in Norway. It's people everywhere, man, and the monarchs are not immune, right? Like it's just interesting that that's coming at that time, when we're looking so closely at these people that have so much power and control. So
yeah.
Well, guess what, guys? You matter to us, and because of that, you're on Good Will Podcasting, and this was great. I appreciate you joining us. I know it's a little bit later there for you. I saw a yawn or two, I think. So your eyes blinking a little bit.
Oh no! I was putting some content before this video, so that's just
there you go.
Yeah. But
I'm yawning too, and it's 3:45. I'm tired. Not good.
Dan.
I'm always yawning.
This has been so fun. I've really enjoyed talking to you guys. As I said, I've followed you guys for maybe 3.5 to 4 years, and to actually get to speak to you guys on a podcast has been great. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I think we know when we're gonna have you back. I mean, I think we have to do House of the Dragon season 3 now. So there you go. Yeah. You guys heard it here first.
When does that come out, guys?
July.
Yeah. Okay.
Hasn't got a date yet, but July.
Okay.
Well, until then, please, everyone, guys, tell them again where they can follow you.
Yes. Midnight Gaz, which is my TikTok and Instagram. And then if you want to follow like my film TV page on Instagram, it's Viewed by Gaz. So I've got 2 pages on Instagram, one on TikTok. You can find me there. I'll try to talk about film and TV as much as I can. So yeah.
There we go. Please check them out, guys. Please check us out next week. I think we're gonna be talking about The Bride, Maggie Gyllenhaal's film with Christian Bale, her brother Jake Gyllenhaal,
we have Hopper's
and also
first
Jesse Buckley. Oh shit, you are right. Holy crap. I forgot when we're recording this. Actually, scratch that. We're talking about Hoppers on Sunday with Duck Takes.
Have you guys seen it yet?
No, we're both watching it tomorrow. Yeah. It was difficult because me and Dan talked about it because Hoppers and The Bride come out the same weekend, but luckily they're doing early screenings of Hoppers this weekend. So we're going to talk about Hoppers. Again, there's really nothing significant coming out officially this weekend that we care about. So we're going to talk about Hoppers this weekend and then The Bride next weekend. So Hoppers, animation fans.
Yeah.
Be excited for that. But yes, please go check out Gaz. Check us out in just a couple days when we post the Hoppers video with Duck Takes. But until then, let us know your thoughts on A Night at Seven Kingdoms Season 1. Let us know what you're thinking about Season 2 if you're excited for it. But please, this week, go outside, sit on a park bench, touch some grass, call up your friends, watch a good movie or a good TV show. Watch The Wire. And we'll see you then. Peace out, everybody.